Good morning, everybody. Hey, welcome out to our Saturday morning workshop here. Let me get it switched over so you can see what we're showing you. There we go, perfect. All right, I'm Shade Foray. I'm here with Steven Swenson. These are trainings that we do every few months that people are welcome to come out and attend. So we're happy to have you join us.
Yeah, definitely. Today we're going to be talking about over-the-counter tax liens. So definitely a new subject. Usually we talk about generally tax lien and deed investing, but in this one we decided to kind of do a more specific angle, and we're going to talk about OTCs today.
Yeah, and if you're new to us, or if you're somewhat unfamiliar with us, most of the people that seem to find us through the videos that we have available online. We've been involved with tax sales since about 99, 2000. We started out at kind of an interesting point in the history of tax sales, just because it's right around the time that the internet was becoming available and readily used, and so it's really a pretty important point in time to get involved with tax sales, because really anything you did with tax sales before that would no longer really be all that applicable anymore with the way the internet was changing everything about the investment. And so we've worked with a lot of people from all over the country, and we've basically been able to learn about tax sales just about everywhere, and we're still learning things every day.
Yeah, I mean, Shade's exactly right. When we first got started, even the process of going about and getting a tax sale list or researching, property records, you were heading down to the county courthouse and spending a couple of days. And so much has changed really since we first got started, and we've got a chance to kind of watch that evolve over the last 15, 20 years or so. And so like Shade said, we essentially provided training programs for seminar companies for quite a few years, and then a couple of years ago we decided to essentially just no longer work with seminar companies like we did, and just really offer our program directly to the public.
Right. I think that for us, the educational side of it and people being able to learn how it all works has always been important to us. We realized in the beginning that there was a lot of stuff out there that didn't really do a lot of teaching or training, didn't really actually show people how to do it, and that's always been what we've been interested in, and the aspect of it that we've enjoyed. So tax sale support is the name of the website that we operate, and the membership service that we offer. If we were to dive here into tax sales a little bit, some of you may be somewhat familiar with them, and some of you may not be. There are three primary buying methods that can be used for purchasing tax liens and deeds, and this is pretty well applicable for just about any part of the country, essentially. You've got live on-site auctions, which are probably still the most common, online auctions, which are something that have become increasingly popular, and then something called over-the-counter.
Yeah, exactly. And essentially over-the-counter, we're going to go through and describe exactly what that is, but it's a term that's used for purchasing tax liens or tax deeds after the sale directly from the county. So with over-the-counter investing, it works with tax liens, it works with tax deeds, it works with redemption deeds, and literally there is probably about 70% of the counties that offer over-the-counter investing of some type. So between land banks, over-the-counter list, county list, state health land, there's a huge amount of opportunity for investors that are willing to go out there and search for these properties, research through list, and find these diamonds in the rough.
Yeah, there are some unique opportunities and benefits associated with over-the-counter investing. But we're essentially talking about any kind of lien or deed that was offered at a tax sale at some point, and for whatever reason didn't sell. It can be purchased directly from the county. So ultimately, they are the liens and deeds that are left over from sales. This means that we tend to get more junk, but we also have, like Steve mentioned, more diamonds in the rough. We've got more opportunities there, and we're not competing directly in a sale or in any kind of competitive bidding or auction experience. We're just simply going through a list, deciding what we like, and making payment arrangements with the county. So there's less stressful, I guess, if you're not into the live auction experience.
Yeah, and if you're willing to go out there and do research, this is really one of the best ways to purchase tax liens and deeds as far as price is concerned, as far as interest rate is concerned, and there's just a huge amount of opportunity out there.
Yeah, basically, for counties, any property, any liens or deeds that they don't sell, just represents lost revenue for them. And really, this is all about property tax enforcement for them. They just want the money that's owed to them. And so they can either, they can either try to schedule another sale, or they can place them on the books and offer them directly to the public, which is what a lot of places will do. So whether you're investing in liens or deeds, there are a lot of over-the-counter opportunities out there. And I think when we're talking over the counter, I think a lot of people envision or have the idea that it's only junk that's available. And certainly there's more junk out there, but there's also a lot of opportunity because we look through the kind of stuff every day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do a good portion of our investing and also the investing that we do with our personal coaching students, really through different types of over-the-counter tax liens and deeds. And so, it's something that we come across a lot, even when we're doing these type of trainings. Well, if they're over-the-counter, that probably means they aren't any good. And there's really three different reasons. Now, the number one reason is that there's more properties or more liens or more deeds available than there is investors and money at the auction. If a county is trying to sell $1 million worth of tax liens and there's only 500,000 among 20 investors there, you're not going to be able to sell all of those tax liens regardless of how good they are. And so that's primarily the reason why. There's a couple of other reasons why as well, but that's usually going to be most often the reason why.
Yeah, the vast majority of tax sales that take place are still conducted as on-site auctions. So what that does is it limits the total number of bidders, basically buyers, that the county can have to those that are able to travel to the sale live. And because of that, a lot of the counties that are holding these sales are also not located near a lot of, they're not centrally located or easy, I guess, to get to in a lot of cases. And so there are a lot of reasons why properties may not sell at the auction. And in fact, with the way that some states work, it's almost expected for them to have a fair amount of leftover after the sale. It's a normal part of how the sale operates, not unusual at all. But there are unique advantages associated with over-the-counter investing for both liens and deeds, and things that make it more appealing in some ways than other strategies, at least for some people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're talking about over-the-counter tax liens and deeds, you're not going to have to attend the auction. You're not going to have to go out there in person. And so what this gives is a huge opportunity for people that don't want to travel, that want to purchase tax liens and deeds outside their own area, especially if they live in a market like we do, for example, where they only have tax sales once a year and there's really not a huge opportunity here. And so if we really want to be aggressive tax sale investors, we're going to have to do that in other areas. But with over-the-counters, we don't need to travel. We can do, we do 99% of our research here from our home office. Here from our office.
Really, if you think about it, that wasn't even possible 10 years ago.
Oh, no.
It's changed so much in just the last 20 years that it's remarkable, and I think it's going to continue to change. One of the biggest advantages that the over-the-counter investing offers is the fact that you're not competing directly with somebody else that is either bidding up the price of the deed or lowering, bidding down the interest rate on the lien that you earn. So if you're buying a tax lien over the counter, the advantage is you automatically earn the maximum interest rate return, which for tax lien investing, that's what it's all about, is how much the rate of return is that you can earn. And without any direct competition, you earn the state's maximum interest rate return. With deeds, you basically don't have to worry about somebody bidding up the price, so you can get it for minimum bid amounts.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be probably one of the number one benefits, in addition to being able to do it without traveling or being able to do it with most of your research done online is that, like Shade said, you aren't going to be competing. You're going to get that lien at 18% or 16% or 14% or whatever the county or state, gives you. You're going to be able to pick up that property for just the delinquent taxes, and in some cases for even less than taxes owed. Also, there's a huge selection. It's amazing how many different states, and we'll go through and talk about all of the over-the-counter states that are currently offering tax liens and deeds, but there is just a huge selection. We're literally talking about hundreds of thousands of tax liens and deeds that are available.
And Steve mentioned something that is a phenomenon that we've started to see over the last 10 years that's becoming more and more common, and it represents an incredible investment opportunity for anybody that's into real estate, and that is the ability to acquire property for less than the taxes owed. What is happening is that counties basically that have their over-the-counter lists here, they have let's say lists of properties that were offered at an auction but didn't sell. For counties, they've got these properties sitting on their books, and the longer that a property sits on the books, the worse it is from an investment perspective, because basically the taxes that are owed are constantly accumulating. So if you have a property that's been sitting on the books for many years, it can get to the point where the property taxes owed are so high that the property just is not appealing at all. The county, I think, is beginning to realize and recognize that these properties are never going to get purchased because they simply become less and less attractive as time goes on. And so what we've noticed is that there are more and more counties now that are just interested in getting a new owner into that property so that they can start collecting property taxes on it again, because in some cases it's been many years since they've been able to collect any kind of tax on these properties. And so they found the best way to do this is to forget about the amount that is owed. So if you've got $3,000 or $5,000 owed in taxes, they basically forget about the amount, and what they'll do is offer the property. They'll be willing to, let's say, accept bids on the property, or they might start all the properties off at a selling price of $100 and sell it to the highest bidder. So in situations where the county is willing to forget about what's owed, there is a tremendous opportunity to pick up property for dirt cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And there's really quite a few different types of properties that you can find on over-the-counter list, be that tax lien, be that tax deed. When you're looking at over the counters, essentially there's different types of properties that you're obviously going to want to target. Single family homes or mobile homes with land, commercial property, commercial land, residential land. There's a huge amount of tax liens that have value and have use, and that's what we're looking for. When we're looking for a tax lien or tax deed, we need to make sure that the property is usable and has a good value, especially versus the cost that we're paying for it, be that tax lien or tax deed.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the biggest risk that we face as investors is buying useless land, or buying a lien against useless land, or land that doesn't have any value. The county is going to give an assessed value to every single piece of property within the county, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the property is usable and sellable, that it's desirable. That's really part of what's important there. In fact, when you're going to buy liens, that's one of the questions that you're asking yourself about the property the lien is placed against before you buy the lien is what the chances are of the lien redeeming. And the way to pick out good tax liens is to pick out those liens that are most likely to redeem. And the easiest way to identify those are the ones that have the greatest value and use, because people don't want to let those types of properties go. The less use and value a property has, the more likely it is for somebody to allow it to go to foreclosure.
Yeah, and when we're talking about tax liens, one of the primary risks that you're going to come across is tax liens that have excessive roll-up. And when we talk about roll-up, essentially what we're talking about is other years' worth of delinquent taxes, other liens against the property. So if you buy a tax lien from 2014, well, there may be a tax lien from 2015, 16, 17 on that property. And when you foreclose, all of those delinquent taxes need to be paid. And so when you're looking at a tax lien certificate, it's important to see how long or how many liens have been issued against that property. How long has this property been delinquent? If it's been delinquent for 8 years, that means there's 8 tax liens against the property. And that could easily affect the investment, because you're going to have to pay off all those delinquent taxes to essentially foreclose on the property.
Yeah, in fact, it's probably one of the biggest common mistakes that new investors make when they go to buy tax liens is not accounting for the roll-up amount. It's also part of why tax liens have such tremendous investment security. That lien that is created by the county, is basically a legal instrument, that's used to recover, past due taxes that are owed. That lien, though, prevents the owner from being able to transfer ownership. So in other words, they can't sell the property as long as that lien exists, or as long as those liens exist against the property. Well, the same is true for us as lien holders. With tax liens, we have a redemption period. Every tax lien is sold through a redemption period. That's like a grace period that the property owner has, and the duration is set by state law. But with a tax lien, we have to wait for that redemption period to expire before we can begin to try to pursue foreclosure on the property. Because ultimately, tax liens are going to result in one of two potential outcomes. Tax liens either redeem, or they don't redeem, and the redemption period expires, which means they are going to foreclosure. So they're either going to redeem or they're going to be foreclosed on, but it's really going to be one way, or the other when you're looking at these properties. And if we're talking about these liens, one of the major problems is somebody that buys a lien against a property without looking into the past due taxes that are owed. It's possible for them to buy that lien without knowing that. And if you buy a property that has excessive roll-up, what that means basically is that when the redemption period expires, your legal recourse is to foreclose on the property. But part of foreclosing on the property, before they'll transfer ownership, is going to require bringing the taxes current. And if it's going to cost too much or more than it's worth to try to bring the taxes current, then you're going to be in a tough situation as a lien investor, because that means you either have to walk away from your lien, or you have to invest quite a bit more money to acquire the property.
Yeah, Shade's exactly right. I mean, if we're looking at a $10,000 building lot, let's say there's a $350 lien against it. Well, that might look like a safe investment. Your $350 is backed by $10,000. But if there's 10 other liens against the property that total $6 or $7 grand, then to foreclose on the property, you're going to essentially have to pay $6 or $7 grand. And none of those other lien holders have decided to take that option yet. So the longer the property sits on the books, the more risk and the higher the cost to purchase the property, until eventually it really becomes what we call a toxic lien. And so when you're looking at over-the-counter tax liens, you could look at a tax lien that looks okay, but without checking the roll-up, that could completely affect the investment. In addition with that, it's not that hard in most of the counties now to check the roll-up. All you need to do is just go to the tax collector's office and look at the tax records. You can quickly determine how many other liens are against the property.
Yeah, in fact, that is a good point, that it is getting a lot easier to identify something like the added roll-up. And the way that a lot of the lists are set up, the tax collectors section, or even the specific property records for that property, their tax records and history, are just one link away. You basically click on one of the links that are on the online list, or on the list the county provides, and oftentimes it's right there in front of you. So it's an important thing to check, but one that a mistake that a lot of people make, on a consistent basis when they invest.
Yeah, there's a tons of different types and essentially terms that the county will use to describe over the counter. Of course, you've heard over the counter and OTC, but there's assignment purchasing. There's essentially county owned. Tax forfeited land is often used.
Yeah, in fact, it really leads to why tax liens and deeds have never been more popular in the past, and why they're somewhat confusing. Why they've not been a mainstream investment sooner in time And the reason for that is because they lack any kind of uniform system nationwide for how they are offered, or how things are done and performed. You basically have 50 different sets of state laws that control property tax enforcement. And so between those 50 different states, you have quite a bit of variation between how they do things, what terms they use for things. And that was part of our challenge in the beginning, was trying to kind of break that down and figure out how it worked from a nationwide perspective. Fortunately, we were able to kind of break that down into 3 general systems, that we can that pretty well any state in the country uses. And we've also been able to figure out a lot of the terms and things that the counties use, because that's part of the challenge as well, like all of these different terms here to essentially describe the same thing.
Yeah, and there's actually quite a few more terms than this. Instead of county owned, there's county held. There's tax foreclosure instead of tax forfeited. Land bank, a lot of different counties are creating land banks and state land banks to offer them. Struck off, upset bids, list of lands. There's so many different terminologies that can be used to essentially describe the same thing. These are the properties that didn't get sold that are going to be available after the sale.
Now, I mentioned that there's all these different systems used in the United States, and one of the challenges in the beginning was trying to determine what those systems were, and trying to figure out some kind of order to them. And what we found is, there are a total of 3 systems that are used in the United States for property tax enforcement. And every state in the country will use at least one of these systems. There are a handful of states, in fact, most states will use just one of these systems, but there are a handful of states that will use 2 of these systems. But those are tax liens, tax deeds, and redemption deeds. That pretty well describes property tax enforcement everywhere in the U.S.
Yeah, in fact, when we first got started, I remember trying to figure out what is the difference between a tax lien and a tax deed. And when we were first doing this, back in early 2000, it was hard to even find information, books, training that would explain this information. And so when we first created our program, back in 2005, 2006, we essentially had to go through and research each state and figure out how their tax sale system work. And that's how we actually create, not necessarily created, but put these 3 different groups together. Tax liens describe a certain type of system, tax deeds describe a certain type of tax sale system, and then redemption deeds. There was this group of states that were different than tax liens and tax deeds. They were almost a combination of both. And so essentially we started calling them redemption deeds, and it's kind of a term that's kind of catched on, and it's used by a lot of different people within the tax sale investment industry.
Yeah. In fact, being able to understand these 3 is relatively simple, and you can understand, how these 3 work. You can pretty well grasp property tax enforcement anywhere in the United States. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges in the beginning, was trying to understand how different states operated, and trying to interpret the state laws, because that was ultimately what we had to rely on, was state laws to try to distinguish some of the differences between how states would conduct their tax sales. Tax liens are a fairly common system that are used, here in the United States, and they are a great system. Really, it's a pretty ingenious system in a lot of ways, because it is a system that benefits everybody that's involved. Basically, it's one of those rare things that is a win-win situation for everybody that's involved, including the property owner. I mean, after all, property tax enforcement, these methods we're talking about, these are all they are alternatives to losing your property much faster because of delinquent property taxes. In general, the United States, local governments are very lenient towards property owners and not wanting to take property away. It's usually a last resort to collect the taxes that are owed. Would be to take the property away. But tax liens are a great example, though, of just the genius of the system. When we're talking about a tax lien, we're usually talking about a single year's worth of delinquent taxes that are owed. And the county's primary purpose in all of this, remember, is to collect the money that's owed to them. That's really their only purpose. It's what it's what they're after. Their purpose in creating a tax lien against these properties that have delinquent taxes is really just so they can sell the liens at auction, at tax sale, so that they can collect the money they need to operate now.
Yeah, exactly. Here's an example of some over-the-counter tax liens. Here are 4 different properties, 4 single-family homes, and these are actually over-the-counter tax liens that we got off one of our lists that are available on the website. So we have probably one of the largest over-the-counter databases, over-the-counter list databases.
Yeah, probably anywhere.
Yeah, and so essentially these are just 4 different tax liens in the same county that are essentially over the counter. Now, these homes aren't necessarily incredibly sexy, but they are nice single family homes. And when we're looking at the lien amount, we're looking at a $1,000 tax lien with a $66,000 value, a $379 tax lien on a commercial property with a $55,000 value, a $1,000 $71. $1,400.89. And so we have, 4 different examples here that if somebody was willing to go do the work and research this particular list, they would be able to find, many, many good examples of tax liens that they could purchase. Now, with these particular tax liens, this is in the state of Nebraska. A lot of people don't think about purchasing tax liens in the state of Nebraska, but you're earning a 14% interest rate against single family homes. Now, when you go to foreclose, if you do foreclose, if they don't pay you back, then you will essentially hire an attorney if you don't live there to go through the foreclosure process for you. It may cost you some money. But even if that's the case and the property owner redeems, they're going to have to pay that off to you anyway. So, essentially your money's protected. And then if it goes through foreclosure, you get this property. And there's usually only a few years worth of delinquent taxes. So maybe to foreclose on the property, you're on one of these properties, the top right one, you're paying $2,000 or $3,000, but essentially you're foreclosing on a property that's worth $70,000, $80,000.
Yeah, one thing that's important to recognize and distinguish about tax liens is that tax liens are created to redeem. That's their primary purpose, and that's why the vast majority of them, more than 95%, almost always, in some cases it's even higher, percent of properties redeem. And the reason for that is because obviously nobody wants to lose money to foreclosure. Nobody wants to give up money or give up property to the county. Most people will pay their property taxes even if they're a little bit late. It's not unusual for people to be late with property taxes. That's actually very, very common. And the lien is really a system that's designed to protect property owners more than anything. But if you're looking to invest in liens, your objective should be the interest rate return that you're going to earn on those liens. In fact, it's one of the reasons why banks and big financial institutions have been investing in liens for years, is because the liens enable them to earn a high interest rate return with an investment that's secured by property. As far as banks are concerned, they don't care what the lien is against. They'll buy it. If it's a lien, they'll buy it. And that's because they know that the vast majority of the liens are going to redeem, and the county doesn't have to do anything. On the I'm sorry, when banks or financial institutions buy liens, they don't have to do anything with them for the most part. They can just sit back and get checks in the mail as these liens redeem. Unfortunately, a lot of times when these financial institutions buy these liens, they sit back and just wait for them to redeem, but they're also the same parties that aren't pursuing foreclosure probably when they should, which is why sometimes you get these toxic liens that have too much in property taxes owed against them because the first 3 lien holders didn't initiate foreclosure, when they had a chance.
Yeah, exactly. If you're willing to go out there and look and do some research, you can find great over-the-counter tax liens that your money's protected and that it's really one of the best investments that you can earn. You're earning a double-digit return because in over-the-counter situation, you automatically earn the state's maximum interest rate, like we talked about before. So, whatever that interest rate is on those tax liens, 14%, you're automatically earning 14%. And the property itself is acting as collateral for the investment. Not only that, but it's backed by state law.
Yeah, which you can't get more secure than that in terms of the investment. In fact, normally the lien amount that you're paying pales in comparison to the value of the property. So if you're buying tax liens are generally viewed as a long-term investment because you can't control when it redeems. It redeems when the delinquent property owner pays off their tax bill, and that's unpredictable. You don't know if that's going to happen in the beginning of the redemption period or the end of the redemption period or not at all. So to invest in liens, what you're doing is you're investing for that high interest rate return on a really safe investment. But that needs to be your objective. Otherwise, you're going to end up, if you're investing in liens because you want property, you're going to end up being disappointed over and over and over again as liens redeem because it's such a small percentage of them that redeem. If you're into property acquisition, if that's what you want, we'd probably tell you to go after a different investment initially. But tax liens work excellent for those that just want a high rate of return safely. Like, for instance, retirement funds are a perfect example of the type of funds that work really well with tax liens because you can earn a much higher rate of return with them with these tax liens, and it's also much safer.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing to remember about tax liens, and especially when we're talking about over-the-counter tax liens, is the redemption period begins on the day of sale. So that auction date is when the redemption period is going to start. So when you're buying a tax lien that's a year old, you're buying that tax lien a year into the redemption period. So you're going to have a shorter period of time before you can foreclose. So if you bought a tax lien in Florida that was a year and a half into the redemption period, you could essentially start that foreclosure process in 6 months. Now, what that does is it helps you decide how long your investment duration wants to, essentially can go.
Yeah.
If you are looking at a tax lien that's 6 months, then essentially you can start the foreclosure process in 6 months. If you want to wait a year, then you can look at tax liens that are a little bit fresher, have a year before the redemption period starts.
Yeah, it is a good way to be able to control that duration a little bit because tax liens are unpredictable as to when they redeem. When you buy a lien, you basically have to look at the redemption period as the duration or potential duration of the investment. It can even go a little bit beyond that because it could redeem after foreclosure is filed. Once they're trying to initiate the foreclosure process, they could end up redeeming later. So it's important to buy tax liens with the assumption that they're going to most likely end up redeeming, and the interest rates paid on them are great, really high. Some of the states that offer over-the-counter tax liens include Alabama, Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Maryland, Montana, Nebraska, and some of these states offer a really good high maximum interest rate return, anywhere from 18 to 24% in some cases here.
Yeah, exactly. These are all different states that you could essentially purchase over-the-counter tax liens, and that states that we have list for. So essentially, these are the states that we have list for. There's some other states that can offer over-the-counters but don't have any available. So these are the states that actually have over-the-counter tax liens that are available and that are available to purchase or get the list off the website.
Over-the-counter deeds are an interesting opportunity here because we're basically talking about properties that are at this point county-held land, state-held land. These are properties that were offered at a tax deed auction, but that didn't sell. If you're looking for property acquisition, if you want property and that's what your goal is, tax deeds are going to be the best vehicle to do that. Tax deeds, the primary difference with a tax deed system is that the county basically waits out a redemption period before they will foreclose on the property due to delinquent taxes. So that redemption period, depending on the state, can range from a couple of years to as many as 5 or I think 5 is probably the longest. But the point is that the county basically waits out this redemption period while the taxes accrue, and then they'll foreclose on the property. And when they foreclose on the property, they'll offer it up at auction at the total amount that's owed in taxes and fees. That'll basically be the starting bid amount, so they're able to collect what's owed as soon as they get a minimum bid on the property.
Yeah, exactly. Tax deeds, over-the-counter tax deeds is essentially the cheapest way to buy real estate, period. Here's a couple of over-the-counter tax deeds examples from 2 different states. The one on the left is one that we purchased for $500. It's a 0.41 acre residential lot, and it's one of the last lots available in the neighborhood, as you can see there. So essentially, you know, we've got a prime residential improved lot in a neighborhood, in a newer neighborhood. We picked this up for $500. Has a property value of around $2,500. The property $25,000. Yeah, excuse me. The property on the right cost $750, and this is a commercial lot, a larger commercial lot, 1.4 acres, has a property value of about $35,000. And so these are the different types of examples that you can find out there and purchase if you're willing to go through and do some research.
Yeah, in fact, one thing that's interesting about over-the-counter deeds is I would say that a good chunk of the properties that we're interested in or that we buy cost us less than $1,000. In fact, in a lot of cases, you know, we buy properties sometimes for $100 or $200, which there is just no other way in the country you can buy real estate at that kind of a price. This is the only system where these types of opportunities exist. And Steve is right when he says this is the absolute cheapest way that you can buy real estate. And the reason for that is even if we compare it to any other type of supposed real estate opportunity, like bank foreclosures, you know, bank foreclosures, the one problem you have with a bank foreclosure is that ultimately, at the end of the day, the bank is still the owner of the property. Even if they had to foreclose on a property owner, they're still the owner, and they still have a vested financial interest in the selling price of the property. You know, they may offer it at a discounted price. They may offer a 10% discount on the property, but ultimately, any money that they take off the price is money they're taking out of their pocket. This is the reason why you can't find good deals on real estate in general. It's because none of the parties selling it normally want to give away any of their profit on the property, so it's hard to find good deals. With tax deed auctions, what's different here is that the county's foreclosing on the property due to delinquent property taxes. They're going to offer it up at what is owed in taxes. That's going to be the opening bid amount. But beyond that amount, the county doesn't care what it sells for. It's the only form of real estate investing where the seller has no financial interest in the selling price of the property. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them if it sells for $30,000 or if it sells for $130,000, because you know both of those amounts are beyond what is owed to them. They'll just end up putting that money on the books. So you know, really what makes tax deeds special is that they don't have, there isn't a party with that financial interest that's preventing you from being able to pick it up for a crazy price. And that's why you'll always be able to get better deals on tax deeds than any other kind of real estate.
Yeah, exactly. You know, of the half dozen or so personal coaching students that we work with, they're all purchasing over-the-counter tax deeds. And like Shade said, I think we've helped our students over the last 6 months or so, our personal coaching students purchase, probably, a couple of dozen of different properties. And I think the most expensive one they purchased was $2,000.
Yeah.
Anywhere between $100 to $2,000, and you're acquiring these properties essentially free and clear. You have 100% ownership rights. You can do whatever you want with the property after that. You can buy it, you can hold it, you can rent it, you can owner finance it. There's just whatever option you want once you've acquired that property. And when you're buying properties for 5 to 10 cents on the dollar, and that property has both value and use, there's really not a better way to acquire real estate than that.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to find better prices than that on property. In fact, it's hard to find prices like that in general. You just can't find those types of low prices on real estate. And something else that's worth noting or talking about is the foreclosure that these properties go through in order to become tax deeds. The county takes these properties through a foreclosure, but that foreclosure is not just any foreclosure. It's a judicial foreclosure. It's a foreclosure that's based on state law, and it's a powerful foreclosure. If you think about it, the foreclosure power that counties need the ability to wield has to have the power to wipe out or extinguish other liens or claims. They have to have precedence over. Otherwise, the county wouldn't be able to collect delinquent property taxes because they wouldn't be able to enforce them. You know, if that foreclosure wasn't a powerful foreclosure, when these properties are delinquent and go through that foreclosure process extinguishes anything attached to the property. This includes something like if there were something like a mortgage against the property, that mortgage would no longer be attached to the property after the foreclosure, because a judicial foreclosure will wipe out anything. It basically wipes out any lien or encumbrance attached to the property, with the exception of other government issued liens. That's the only thing that it can't wipe out against the property, or just other government liens. But anything like a mortgage or any other type of claim or lien against the property ends up getting extinguished upon foreclosure. So when you buy tax deeds, not only do you own it free and clear, but that property itself in a lot of ways is cleaner, I guess you could say, than most real estate you could ever buy, because it's just been through that foreclosure that's wiped out everything.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when you buy that property or you get that deed, essentially you're going to have 100% ownership rights. So you can either, turn around and wholesale the property. You can decide to go through quiet title, which is something you'll learn as you get into tax deed investing, decide if that's the process that you want to go. But there's a huge amount of benefits. I mean, it's internet based. You can do, we do 99% of our research all online. The only exception to that is having a handyman or someone like that go out and view the properties if we're looking at structured properties. We're not going to be bidding. Essentially, we're submitting offers. There's no deadlines. They're available now. And there's a huge amount of opportunity for investors, not only in land, but also for investors in single-family homes, in many different types of property. What's most important to us in looking at any investment, regardless if it's a home or land, is how much we can buy the property for versus the property's value.
Yeah, in fact, the buying price is always the most important factor, I think, when it comes to buying any of these properties. The buying price is a big deal, because it basically affects your overall profitability, and it also affects the overall risk of the investment. But internet-based investing is basically what we specialize in, and beyond that, we also specialize in raw land investments versus property with improvements. You can find some great properties with improvements like single-family homes in some of the tax sales. These properties, sometimes we see properties that have been built in the last 10 years, that are going up for auction in some of these tax sales. Incredible properties, just amazing properties that make some really great investments. But we distinguish between raw land and property with improvements in the types of due diligence and research that are required for those investments as well. For instance, one of the benefits of buying raw land is that it's much easier to do sight unseen when you're investing out of state. In other words, we can buy raw land in a different state, and as long as we can get satellite images of what the property looks like, in some cases we can get street side images to even see about what the property looks like, we feel comfortable buying, because we don't have to worry about things like the condition of the improvements and things that we could only know by being there in person. If we're going to go after those types of properties like homes, then yeah, we do need to send somebody out there to get current images of the property, or we need to be there. It's going to have to be one or the other before we can buy. But raw land presents some unique opportunities. It's also the most common type of land that's offered at tax sales, and it's the most commonly overlooked type of land that's offered in tax sales. There's also more junk land out there, so you've got to be able to sift through more of the stuff. So, we also like raw land in some ways, because we're out-of-state investors usually.
Yeah, exactly. We can essentially do all of that research from here, purchase a property, and the one thing about land that most investors don't realize when they first get started is that there's more than one strategy you can use. In fact, there's unlimited strategies you can use in selling the property. You could do something as just like wholesale. If it needed, you could go through quiet title and have a real estate agent list it and get top dollar. Or you could do even something like seller finance, where you are essentially getting monthly payments coming in, and essentially the property pays for itself. So if you bought a $500 tax deed and you were selling it seller finance for $5,000, and they give you $1,000 down, and we're going to pay $200 a month till the property's paid for. Essentially, that $1,000 down has already paid your investment, and now you're sitting back and collecting a check. If the person that's buying the property quits paying, essentially you don't lose anything. You can go ahead and relist the property and go through that process again, or wholesale, or do whatever you want to it at that point. But you're not stuck in just essentially buying the property and wholesaling. There's a lot of different options that you can employ.
Yeah, in fact, it's never been easier to sell real estate than it is today, because we have so many different resources available to us that allow us to get more exposure when we want to sell a property. There are so many different sites and ways that we can find thousands of people, and yeah, selling methods as well. What's amazing about seller financing with these types of properties is that you can really almost create money out of thin air. If you acquire a property for $100 or $200, your exit strategy options are infinite, because you paid so little for the property that you can sell it in a number of different ways. You can offer it with some kind of a low minimum bid. I mean, even if you get an opening bid of a few $100s for this, or a down payment of a few $100s, you've covered that initial investment up front, and everything that you collect on the property after that is just pure profit. And you can do these with these properties that you're picking up for such a low amount. In the past, if you wanted to get involved with real estate, you had to have usually tens of thousands of dollars and access to much more. This is the only real estate strategy that I know of that you can do with such a small amount of money. You could literally start with $1,000.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of, for some reason, when we created the PDF, it threw off the formatting a bit. But here are some of the over-the-counter tax deed states, and there's actually more states that we're not being able to see them all. The ones that are underlined are essentially tax lien states that offer deeds. So, those county-held liens that they have, eventually they turn those into tax deeds and offer them. But you can see that there's quite a few states, and if we have time, we can go look at the website and go through all of them. But
yeah, Florida's one of them too. There are a handful of states that use two systems, or they'll use, like Florida's probably one of the easier ones to explain anyway, because they use both a tax lien and a tax deed system. Their tax liens are sold with a 2-year redemption period and a maximum interest rate return of 18%. Not too bad. Normally with a tax lien, though, when the redemption period expires, the lien holder forecloses on the property. In Florida, it's a little bit different. When the redemption period expires, the lien holder can basically fill out a form with the county to initiate foreclosure process. When the county does this, though, what they'll do is they will begin foreclosing on the property, and then they'll schedule it for one of their tax deed auctions, where they'll have the property offered up with its opening bid on starting out at what's owed in taxes and fees. So they're going to try to sell the property off at a tax deed auction. If it gets a buyer or a bidder, they use the proceeds from that to pay off all of the lien holders. So in Florida, even if your lien doesn't redeem within the redemption period, it's going to end up going to auction after that, in which case it has a high chance of redeeming as well. So in Florida, you've got a very high chance of getting redemption basically at the end of the lien investment. That's what's going to happen the majority of the time, whether they redeem during the redemption period or whether that occurs after that through the deed sale.
yeah, and we can't see Alabama, but Alabama and a state like Mississippi, they sell tax lien certificates, and when those liens don't sell, essentially they send them to the state, and the state will offer tax deeds. A state like Colorado and Arizona, essentially they don't have a system like Florida. As Shade explained, what they do is they just essentially sit on tax liens until they've gone a certain period of time. And now these counties from these different states that never really offered deeds before in the past are essentially, seeing that there's no use in sitting on these old liens, and so they're foreclosing on them, and then they offer them up at deed sales or over-the-counter deeds. And so that's just giving us more opportunity in more states to buy property.
Yeah, counties are wising up. In fact, it's one of the changes that we've noticed here over the last 5 years of tax sales is more and more counties are beginning to see the financial opportunities in holding their tax sales well and in attracting investors, and they're getting smarter about what they're doing. It doesn't make sense to have hundreds of properties sitting on the county records you're not collecting any property taxes on. It makes more sense to get those properties sold at any price so that you can get new property taxes coming in. And for the most part, counties are really, I think they're wising up to that, which means it's getting easier and easier for tax sale investors, because they're looking for ways to simplify the process. And as they simplify the process, for us, it just means that we have to spend less time, or that the research is that much easier to perform.
Yeah, exactly. The last category is over-the-counter redemption deeds. And essentially, there's only really one state that offers over-the-counter redemption deeds. Georgia has started offering properties through Land Bank, but by that point, the 1-year redemption period has passed, so they're really more of a tax deed. So Texas is going to be the primary state that you're going to purchase redemption deeds from. In the state of Texas, they refer to these properties as struck off.
Yeah, in fact, they're struck off are basically the equivalent of county-held lands, that you can purchase. Although there are so many different terms that counties use. I know that Pennsylvania calls them repository sale properties. It's an odd mix of properties that are out there. Also, when it comes to redemption periods, sometimes redemption periods vary according to the type of land that's being offered or sold. For instance, in Texas, the redemption period is either 6 months or 2 years. It's 6 months on most types of properties. It's 2 years on homestead properties and farmland. And a homestead property is a homestead exemption is an exemption for owner-occupied, single-family homes, and so homestead properties have this 2-year redemption period. But most everything else in Texas has a 6-month redemption period. The penalty rate that's offered in Texas is also different from most interest rates, because the penalty is a flat rate. It's a flat annual rate in Texas that is 25% annually. So if a property redeems in that first 6 months, you basically get a flat 25% return on your money. If it goes for more than 12 months, then you're going to earn 25% for the first year plus an additional 25% for the second year, on it. So there's a potential there to earn a 50% return through redemption in Texas.
Yeah, and also acquiring the property is going to be a lot higher than it would be through a taxing certificate. Tax liens, you have a 5% chance of getting the property. With a redemption deed and a struck off deed, you're probably going to have a 50% chance of getting the property. So there's a lot higher chance that you're going to own the property after that redemption period. Also, unless it's a homestead property, you're going to have a short redemption period. So essentially, if it was a lot, for example, you purchased it 2 months, it had been on the book for 2 months, you're going to have 4 months before you have full ownership. Another important part, and probably one of the most interesting parts of the redemption deeds in Texas, is that if it's a structured property, you actually have ownership rights during the redemption period. In fact, even if it's not a structured property, in any property, you have ownership rights, which means that you could rent out the property, you could live in the property. You're just not going to want to put a ton of money into it versus, except for just regular upkeep until that redemption period is passed, because the property owner can still redeem the property.
Yeah, in fact, property redemption is something that occurs in some cases, but in often cases, the property will end up resulting in foreclosure. Texas also has sales that they hold every single month. And the sales are conducted as live auctions. And so that basically means you've got to be there in person in order to participate in the sale. This has benefits and drawbacks. Obviously, the drawback being that there's travel required in order to participate, but the benefit of that is that the travel required also tends to limit your overall competition, at least to those that can be there present at the sale. So I think you'll find benefits and drawbacks with almost any of these investments, but there are just a constant growing number of opportunities out there.
Yeah, and if you're willing to essentially, contact the counties or really research the list each month as those new lists come up, you're going to be able to find good properties that you can essentially use and purchase. And really shorten that redemption period. So it's really just going to be a matter of work. Unlike other states, Texas isn't going to have any type of online auctions or anything like that. And there's essentially 3 lawyers that will handle a good majority of the auctions in Texas.
Yeah, I think if you're local to Texas, it's a great place, I think, to invest. There are people that but again, it's a little bit different from other investments because it has that combination of tying up your money for a little bit of time. With property ownership, some people are just looking for something more clear or clean cut. For some people, it's exactly what they want. They're happy to get either redemption through the deeds in Texas or to acquire their property. They're kind of happy either way. So it really depends on what you're after as an investor and what your starting resources are. This is part of what we try to tackle with people as we're helping them get started, is to help them define exactly what their available resources are and help them define what their objective is. Because I would say that it's very common for us to have people that will contact us saying that they're interested in buying tax liens, when in reality what they really want is to acquire property. They really want deeds, or they tell us that they want to invest, when really what they're after is just the interest rate returns. What you're going to go after a specific investment. So it totally depends on what you specifically are after and what your objectives are.
Yeah, they think they may want deeds, but once they really get into it, they don't have the time to sell property and wholesale and do all of that. Really, they're going to be better off just putting those in tax and certificates. So really, that's part of what we do with our program is we go through and when somebody becomes a member, they get access to our home study programs. And essentially that's going to take you step by step until you choose an investor profile type. And so once you've chosen an investor profile type, it's pretty easy to narrow that down to a state and an area that you want to get started. That was one thing that we did when we created the program in the very beginning, was trying to make it and help an investor to essentially funnel down through this path to where they know exactly what their investment strategy is, the states that they're going to use that in, and be able to go out there and do that.
Yeah, we have a lot of experience working with people and knowing and understanding what works and what doesn't tend to work, or where people tend to get lost. And so a lot of what we've done here is to try to simplify that process. For instance, in the beginning, we found one of the more time-consuming aspects of it was trying to gather tax sale lists when we were looking for places to begin, and trying to figure out where to begin was always a huge challenge. But after a while, we started gathering the tax sale lists ourselves, because we were going to see these lists in a lot of cases anyway. And that's basically how the list service side of the website began. Was just by getting these lists for our members. And now it is definitely the biggest, I think, overall database of tax sale lists that you'll find. There are some list services out there that will gather foreclosure lists, bank foreclosures, and that basically treat those like their tax sale lists. When in reality, to get the tax list, you normally have to go to some specific places with the county. You basically have to know where to get the lists. There's really no easy way to get them other than just going to the county and downloading them.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, we've been getting county lists directly from the county now for 15 years, on offering it as a list service to our members, and so it's something we've been doing for years. We have the auction calendar that has all of the upcoming auctions, and then we also, of course, have our over-the-counter database. And you can see here, we have the over-the-counter deeds, the liens, the redemption deeds. And if we click on, let's go ahead and just look at tax liens and the deeds real quick, just to show essentially, the liens that are available. You can see that, Alabama has 49 lists, 39,000 liens available. Arizona, Colorado, Arizona has 28,000. Florida has 268,000 liens available on our different lists. And so there's a huge amount of opportunity. If there's additional information like online tax liens that you can buy, we'll include that. Essentially, what we try to do is include everything to help you be successful, from Maryland to Montana, Nebraska, South Carolina. We essentially have the largest collection of over-the-counter lists, and we also don't charge per list like some of the other services. This is all included. Is our 29.
Yeah, it's basic membership, which I think part of what we wanted with the basic membership was for people to be able to get access to the stuff they needed in order to be successful, but to do it without breaking the bank. And so it's a combination of the list service, I think, and the training side of things as well. And yeah, there are so many opportunities. Online auctions are growing, something that we see, being added all the time. There are always more and more places that are putting their stuff available online. And so, we've got an online auction section where you can be able to link directly to any of the online auctions for liens and deeds that are taking place around the country. Anything that tends to be a hang up for investors, we've tried to figure out a system, to work around or to go through, because all these things just end up consuming your time or slowing you down as an investor. And what you really need to get to is to the investing part of the process there, where you're buying property so that you can turn around and sell it. So anything we can do that will get you to the buying part of it faster is worth it.
Yeah, definitely. You can see all of the different opportunities that are taking place. And so if you're really willing to go out there and research and do some work, that's one thing about tax sale investing is we have people that are interested all the time, but they don't mind listening to trainings, but actually going out and researching a county website or doing something like that is really kind of where the action stops. If you're willing to to pull the trigger, if you're willing to get the knowledge, learn how to do it, and go out there and actually do deals, purchase tax liens and deeds, you can be incredibly successful at this business. We've seen this time and time again with the thousands of students we've worked with. There's two types of investors, ones that do it and ones that don't. We have investors that we've tried to help year after year. They've been with us for 10 years and they've never bought a property. And then we have investors that are just joined the membership, and next thing we know, we're getting, success stories and emails about different deals that they're doing. So it's completely upon you, but if you're willing to do it, we're going to be able to provide you with the resources to go out there and make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. This is our membership sign-up page. If you are interested in signing up, you can go to tax sale support under membership, and you can sign up or register here, and we'll get an account created for you. We do weekly webinars as well that you can join and attend every week, covering different topics. So if tax sales are what you're interested in, really, I think our services, the tax sale support, is what you should probably be signed up for, because if it's anything else, you're probably paying too much and getting less.
Yeah, that's definitely the truth.
So, hey, thank you for joining us for this Saturday morning workshop. We'll get a replay of this available and out there for anybody. And if anybody's interested or has questions about anything that we do, whether it be the membership or mentoring, you're welcome to contact us. You can reach me at shade@taxsalesupport.com or Steven@taxsalesupport.com. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Yep, thank you, and have a great weekend.
We'll see you.